All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the second year of the Dunk on AP podcast. This year, we're going to be covering APUS history. So let's go ahead and start off with period one. Remember that period one covers 1491 to 1607. Now, the important thing to understand about this is that this is only 4 to 6% of the test. 1491 to 1607 is only 4 to 6% of the test. So there's only going to be a couple of episodes on this because it's just not the most important stuff. You may get an SAQ on it, you may get some MCQs on it, but you're not going to have an LAQ, you're not going to have a DBQ. So let's go ahead and get rolling. Let's start with the obvious. This starts in 1491 because the beginning of this unit covers everything that happened before Columbus got to the Americas, at least everything that we know about. So let's start with the obvious. European settlers were not the first people in the Americas. A group that we now refer to as Native Americans, Indigenous, or Indian people were here before Europeans. When they got here is really anyone's guess. There are a lot of theories. There's an idea that they may have crossed a land bridge from Asia that once connected Siberia and Alaska. How many natives were here before the settlers came? Also, this is anyone's guess. The guesses range anywhere from 50 million to 100 million, and that is total with North, South, and Central America combined. Obviously, that number is going to drop big time when the settlers show up, but the short answer is we don't know exactly how many. We know that in South America, modern-day Mexico, Central America, there were much more natives than there were in the continental United States, or what we call the upper 48. So there's a lot that we don't know there. They didn't exactly conduct a census. So let's take a quick tour of the American continents, and we'll start with Central and South America. There are three primary civilizations in Central and South America that you need to know. First of all, the Mayans. They hit their height between AD 30 and AD 800. They were an incredibly advanced society with massive cities in the Yucatan Peninsula. They did not coexist alongside, at least not as a major power, they did not coexist alongside the Aztec and the Inca that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. Now, as far as the Aztecs, they were a short-lived but unreal civilization. They were from around 1300 to 1550. That was the height of its run over in Mexico and Central America. They had their capital city, the floating city of Tenochtitlan. It had about 200,000 people at its height, which was as big as almost any European city at the time. The Aztecs practiced human sacrifice. They would have called themselves the Mexica people, and maize was generally the crop that they used to survive. This empire is going to get crushed by Spanish conquistadors led by Hernan Cortez in 1521. Now, the Inca, even shorter lived than the Aztecs. If you needed to just know one of the three of these, the Aztecs would be the one to remember. Wouldn't hurt to remember all three, but the Aztecs are the big one. But the Inca ruled over South America from about 1438 to 1530, and maybe for even a shorter time than that. They were primarily in South America near Peru. They also practiced human sacrifice, but with children. The Spanish will overtake the Inca by 1535. So what do you need to know about these Central American, the modern-day Mexico and South American native groups like the Inca, the Maya, the Aztec? They were highly advanced societies in terms of their organization. They were very, very warlike. They were not the only societies, just the major ones. They engaged in trade with other groups. They had calendars based on scientific observation. They all thrived on agriculture. Mayans and Aztecs were mostly corn. Inca were mostly potatoes. Much more advanced and bigger than North American native societies. Their descendants are still around today in many of these cases. Now, a big idea that you need to understand is we start to shift our attention from the southern part of the American continents up into the north. The spread of maize cultivations from present-day Mexico northward into the present-day American Southwest and beyond supported in economic development, settlement, advanced irrigation, and social diversification among societies. So basically, to summarize that, the golden rule of Native American crops: when in doubt, corn. Eastern Indians grew corn, beans, and squash in what they called the three sister farming. Corn grew in a stalk, this was essentially the way that they grew the three sisters. The stalk provided for the beans grew up the stalk, squash's broad leaves kept the sun off the ground and thus kept the moisture in the soil. It enabled them to have a large population because they then had enough food. So let's dig in on the North American continent. What was the population? Let's go ahead and start there. Anywhere from 1 to 10 million. You may notice that's a lot less than what's going on below, where they have somewhere between 50 to 100 million. A lot less people in the modern day United States and Canada. not anywhere near the power or sophistication or the size of the Inca, the Maya, the Aztecs. They're much more scattered and decentralized, whereas the Mayans, the Incas, and the Aztecs all had some sort of emperor at their center. These societies were mostly broken into groups of less than 300 people, which is basically going to make them a nightmare to memorize. And you don't need to know the individual tribes, but we will need to know a little bit about the regions. So, a general, quick, safe assumption about North American natives: the men usually made tools and hunted for game, while the women gathered plants and nuts or grew crops such as corn, beans, and tobacco. Also, they were not unified in language. They had about 20 different language families with more than 400 distinct languages. So let's go region by region. Just to do us all a favor, I'm going to put them in their modern placements first. These regions are massive. So, as with anything, there's going to be some generalizations. And remember that before anybody that we know of got here, there was a massive dying off of the native population, but we don't know exactly what caused it. And when I say anybody that we know, I mean Europeans. So, the Southwest settlements. The territories were the New Mexico and Arizona. The tribes were the Hokkokam, the Anasazi, and the Pueblo. Then the types of society, they were farming, and they mostly lived in caves, cliffs, and multi-storied buildings. In the Northwest settlements, this was from Alaska to California. There's a bunch of different tribes. There are 4 units or provinces of tribes because the territory is so big. The type of society, and there was hunting, fishing, and gathering. They lived in longhouses or plank houses, and their totem poles saved their stories. They were not a written society. The Great Plains. This was through parts of modern day Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, Montana, Nebraska, New Mexico, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Texas, and Wyoming. A lot of different tribes like the Lakota and the Apaches, some big names there. Their type of society, everything from roaming hunters to farmers and traders. These societies were big traders with each other. The buffalo was king in the Great Plains. They grew corn, beans, and squash. They tended to live in teepees along rivers, and I mean they probably are the natives that you think of whenever you think of natives. So the Midwest settlements were east of the Mississippi River. Tons of different tribes here. Um, they were they were hunting, fishing, and agricultural societies. They lived in a variety of different places in earthen mounds. So in the Northeast settlements, you had a lot of action here because this is where the Europeans are going to settle. The territory is the Ohio River Valley into New York. The Iroquois Confederation, which was made up of the Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, the Oneida, and the Mohawk, were some of the tribes here in the Northeast. Then the types of societies they had were hunting and farming. They lived in longhouses. This is actually going to be where the pilgrims live, and so that's going to be why you maybe recognize some of those names. The Southeast settlements, most of it makes up our definition of the South. You had the Chitimacha tribe, the Natchez, the Biloxi, Cherokee, Seminole, among others. The types of society were farming and hunting. They were very densely populated, and they tended to live in local villages or towns. So then you've got the Atlantic seaboard settlements, New Jersey, south to Florida. You had tons of different tribes. The societies were mostly fishing societies, and they tended to live in timber and bark lodgings along rivers. And of course, all of these ways of life are going to change when the Europeans get here. So that is the first part of our Unit 1 lessons, and I will be back soon with Part 2.